Stas, the owner of a trendy art gallery, slammed his glass of craft beer down on the bar. I bet I'll win the upcoming auction, even if my main lot is a painting by a street artist, he challenged his eternal rival, Igor. Igor, a polished collector, just smirked. Are you out of your mind, Stas? There will be sheikhs and European millionaires at this auction. They want a name, not charity. Your gallery is already on its last legs after your last venture. We'll see what your famous intuition is worth then, Stas retorted, though deep down he knew Igor was right. His recent projects had barely covered their costs, and this auction was his last chance to stay afloat. But the thrill of the gambling, the very thing that had once made him famous in the art world, took over again. The next day, Stas wandered the old city streets, looking at the graffiti and works of street artists. Most of it was derivative and dull. Almost despairing, he turned into a quiet, abandoned courtyard and froze. By a blank brick wall sat an elderly man in a shabby jacket and a faded cap. He wasn't spray painting. He was intently scratching something onto a piece of old plaster with a sharp stone. Stas moved closer. The drawing was astonishing, an incredibly detailed portrait of a bird, but its wings were made of broken watches and its eyes were tiny gears. There was something poignant and brilliant about it. "Good afternoon," Stas said, trying not to sound too pushy. "Did you draw this?" The man looked up at him with tired but clear blue eyes. "Who else? I get restless, so I scratch away while my hands still remember how." "My name is Stas. You have an incredible talent. I'd like to show your work in my gallery, and one piece at a very important auction." The old man chuckled disbelievingly. "Son, what exhibitions? My name is Pyotr, and my exhibitions are here on these walls until the janitors paint over them. Nobody needs this." "You're mistaken," Stas argued passionately. "I will pay you. I will pay you well. Just give me one of your works." Pyotr looked at his rough, stained hands, then at Stas dressed in an expensive coat. A shadow of old pride flickered in his eyes. "I have no canvases or paints. I draw with whatever I find lying around." "That doesn't matter," Stas exclaimed. "It's the essence that's important." After much persuasion, Pyotr finally agreed. He led Stas to his tiny closet-like room under the stairs of an old building where amazing pictures were drawn on pieces of cardboard, plywood, and even old newspapers. It was a whole universe created from trash. Cityscapes were buildings melted like candles, portraits of people whose faces were composed of scraps of newspaper headlines. Pain shone through in every work, but so did some indomitable hope. Stas realized that Pyotr wasn't just drawing, he was chronicling his lost life. He had once been a famous book illustrator, but after the collapse of the USSR, his profession became obsolete, and then a series of personal tragedies cast him to the curb. Stas chose one work, that same bird with wings made of clocks, and paid Pyotr a sum that brought tears to the old man's eyes. On the day of the auction, the atmosphere in the hall was electric. Arab sheikhs, European aristocrats, and Russian oligarchs were lazily flipping through the catalogs which listed the names of fashionable, acclaimed artists. When Stas's lot was brought onto the stage, a rough piece of plaster in a simple wooden frame, a snicker went through the room. Igor, sitting in the front row, smiled smugly. "And now, ladies and gentlemen," the auctioneer announced, "a lot from the Stanislav Volsky Gallery, The Bird of Time by the artist Pyotr. Starting price, $1,000. A silence fell, broken only by quiet chuckles. No one raised a paddle. Stas felt a cold dread. It seemed it was all over. And then into that dead silence came an elderly voice with a strong French accent. 50,000. Everyone turned. In the back row sat Monsieur Duval, the legendary art critic and collector, known for his impeccable taste. He wasn't looking at the stage. His gaze was riveted on the drawing. 100,000, a German banker immediately shot back, sensing that something extraordinary was happening. 200, Duval parried, unperturbed. The bidding, which no one had expected, turned into a fierce duel. Igor sat with his mouth open, his self-assurance evaporated. The price soared to $500,000. Finally, Monsieur Duval named the final sum, and the bang of the gavel echoed through the stunned hall. When the auction was over, Duval approached Stas. "Young man, I don't know where you dug up this genius, but I haven't seen anything like it since the early avant-garde. There is more truth and soul in this than in everything else sold here today. I want to meet the artist. I want to buy everything he has ever created." That evening, Stas went to see Pyotr. The old man was in his small room mending an old shoe. He didn't even ask how it went. "Pyotr, I was at a loss for words. Your painting was sold for a lot of money. And the most famous collector in the world wants to organize a solo exhibition for you in Paris." Pyotr looked up, and there was no surprise in his eyes, only a deep, universal weariness. "See, son, I told you nobody needed this. It's just that people sometimes forget to look around. And art, it's everywhere, even in a dump. The main thing is that someone sees it." Stas stood in the middle of the room filled with brilliant works created from trash and felt incredibly foolish with his bet and his thirst for validation. He had won the bet, saved his gallery, and perhaps become richer. But in that moment, he realized that the greatest luck of his life was not the auction he had won, but the meeting with this quiet old man who had taught him that true value can't always be framed in gold and hung on a wall. Sometimes you just have to see it in a piece of old plaster in an abandoned courtyard. A year later, the exhibition Pyotr from the Street opened in Paris to overwhelming success, and Stas established a foundation at his gallery to support forgotten and unknown talents, forever changing his attitude to art and life.